Welcome back to our chronological life of Christ, or as near as I can get it. And we're with the Sermon on the Mount, and we're looking at make false vows or oaths based on Matthew 5:33 to 37. So here we are in the midst of after the Beatitudes and the things that follow the Beatitudes. Verse 33 says, "Again you have heard it was said of them of old, you shall not make false vows, but shall perform to the Lord your vows. But I tell you, don't swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is the throne of God, nor by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Neither should you swear by your head, for you can't make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Whatever is more than these is of the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist him who is evil, but whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone sues you to take away your coat, let him have your cloak also. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks, and don't turn away from him who desires to borrow." So we're looking at making false vows today. The key verse of the Sermon on the Mount, of course, is found in Matthew 5, verse 20. "For I say to you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." The illustration of kingdom righteousness is contrasted with the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. There's personal conflicts, there's men and women relationships, vows, retaliation, and love your enemies. What is an oath? It's a solemn promise of affirmation, often invoking a divine witness regarding one's future action or behaviour. A sworn declaration that one will tell the truth, especially in court of law. For men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute. When we were kids, we used to make oaths all the time. We called them pinky promise. Swear on my mother's grave, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. That's pretty drastic, that one. Of course, the oath was rendered null and void if one taking the oath had crossed his fingers behind his back. Jesus picks up another misapplication of the present generation's religious leadership, making oaths or vows they did not intend to keep. In Jesus' day, the Pharisees made many vows, but found ways around keeping them. These were primarily in common speech, not in legal situations. The Greek word, "you shall not make false vows," is epiporkio. We often refer to lies as porky pies. The word vows and fulfill your vows is orkos, which refers to what is promised with an oath. Jesus is referring to someone swearing that something is true when they know that it is false, and failing to do what one has promised under oath. This goes back to the Old Testament law. Leviticus 19 says, "You shall not swear by name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." Numbers 30, "If a man makes a vow to the Lord or swears an oath to bind himself by some agreement, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth." Ecclesiastes 5, "Don't be rash with your mouth. Let not your heart utter anything hastily before God. For God is in heaven and you on earth. Therefore, let your words be few. For a dream comes through much activity, and a fool's voice is known by his many words. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have owed. Better not to vow than to vow and not pay." Deuteronomy 6, "If anyone swears that something is true and brings God into it, it had better be true, and you had better fulfill what you swore to do." Deuteronomy 10, "You shall fear the Lord your God, you shall serve him, and to him you shall hold fast and take oaths in his name." To swear an oath means you're promising that you're going to do what you said. And when one uses God as a reference to do this, that person was basically saying that if I break this oath, it will be the same as breaking it with God. To break an oath was a sin, as we saw in our verses. But consider what we read in Zechariah chapter 8. Let none of you think evil in your heart against your neighbour. Do not love a false oath, for all these things I hate, says the Lord. Notice, God hates false oaths. In other words, these oaths that are not kept. Exodus 20, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. This passage is usually used against swearing, but really speaking about or using God's name to make an oath, and then not keeping it in the same ballpark. Vows for service were voluntary. Choose to do something for the Lord. When one vowed, he was to fulfill the vow. The Greek root word, translated swear falsely, is used in 1 Timothy. Perjurers. To commit perjury is to lie under oath. So to lie under oath was forbidden. But in other circumstances, the Jews thought it was okay to lie. Is lying acceptable? The Roman Catholics have two terms: the doctrine of strict mental reservation, to distinguish it from a wide mental reservation. In the strict mental reservation, the speaker mentally adds some qualification to the words which he utters, and the words, together with the mental qualifications, make a true assertion in accordance with fact. In other words, it's okay to lie. On the other hand, in the wide mental reservation, the qualification comes from the ambiguity of the words themselves, or from the circumstances of the time and place or person in which they are uttered, especially acceptable if speaking to a non-Roman Catholic. Islam, it's okay to lie to unbelievers. Speaking from a position of power at the time, Ali confirms that lying is permitted in order to deceive an enemy. The Quran defines the enemy as any disbeliever. It continues, he who makes peace between the people by inventing good information or as saying good things is not a liar. In other words, lying is permissible when the end justifies the means. The Jewish leaders always insisted on the obligation of telling the truth. They said the world stands firm on three things: justice, truth, and peace. But even more so, they insisted on truth if confirmed by an oath. The Jewish custom in reality was even worse. It could be described as evasive swearing, as in oaths. The Jews divided oaths into two classes: those which were absolutely binding and those which were not. The Jews had corrupted the idea of oath-taking or vow-keeping, so Jesus in Matthew 5:33 is correcting that teaching. The Jews took a creative license and basically would think it would be okay for them to make a promise and break it, as long as it didn't answer by God himself. In fact, they even went further than this, as we read Jesus' rebuke to them. Matthew 23, woe to you blind guides who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? Whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that is on it, he is obligated to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is the greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore he who swears by the altar swears by it, and by all the things on it. He who swears by the temple swears by it, and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him who sits on it. This gives us some great insight into what the Pharisees and scribes were teaching. They thought they had found a loophole in keeping their oaths. Again, they thought it was acceptable to swear an oath by heaven, the altar, or the temple, and then break that oath, as long as they didn't invoke the name of the Lord. However, we also see them putting emphasis on things they should not have, because they made swearing by the gold of the temple, or the gift, or the altar as being an obligation, so they had it all messed up. Matthew 5:34, but I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you can't make one hair white or black, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. Some misunderstand what Jesus is teaching here, but if we keep it in this context, we can understand exactly what Jesus is saying. First, Jesus is not saying don't swear at all, but he's speaking about making false oaths. Again, other verses teach that swearing is wrong. Second, Jesus is not condemning all oaths. He's condemning all oaths that are done falsely and done by swearing on other things. The main point of this is, if you say you're going to do something, your word is your bond. Your word ought to be your bond. You should not be swearing by other things thinking that it will not matter if you break your oath or your promise, because it will matter. This is why Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. As Christians, people, and especially our brethren, should not have any reason to doubt our words. If we love God and we want to be Christ-like, then we should be truthful. If we say we'll do something, then we should. If we say we will not do something, then we should not. And I'll add one other caveat in here. If we say we'll be somewhere at a certain time, we should be there. James teaches the same idea in James 5:12. But above all, my brethren, do not swear, either by heaven or by earth or with any other oath. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, lest you fall into judgment. We are not to attempt to find distinctions in our words when we make a promise. I will promise to pay you back soon. 25 years later, no payment. Well, I didn't say how soon. I will be there unless the sun is shining, and I do not find anything better to do. God praises one who keeps his promises, even when he is hurt by it. In a court, an oath or affirmation our legal system provides, an alternative to the oath in the Bible. There's a non-religious affirmation that can be sworn by people who do not wish to swear the oath. They may affirm that the testimony they will give is truthful. Notice two examples of oaths being taken. The first one is Jesus. Matthew 26. But Jesus kept silent, and the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under an oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Jesus was on trial by the Jews, and the high priest put Jesus under oath. And Jesus answers under oath and doesn't rebuke them for being put under oath. The next example by Paul is a little bit different. It's still calling on God to be his witness. Paul does so multiple times, but let's look at one example. For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers. Romans 1 verse 9. David saying the Gateway Lectures writes, the conclusion that not all oaths are forbidden is further supported by a study of the Greek, from which it is translated any other oath. James uses the word allos, meaning another of the same kind. Had James intended to teach that all oaths are wrong, he would have used heteros, which means another kind of a different, or another of a different kind. Therefore, it's obvious that James intended to say that all oaths of the type specifically under consideration were being forbidden, that is, false oaths. Think about it this way. If we're not to take any oaths and we take this to the extreme, then none of us could ever take any loans. We couldn't enter into any agreements with anyone, including giving our spouse any guarantees about being with them till we die. If these things I just mentioned are not oaths, then what are they? When we think about it, we can see that Jesus and James are not saying do not ever make any kind of oath. Rather, the message is, do not swear by things, but stand on your word. Follow through with it. Whatever you say you're going to do, because your word is your bond, you need to do it. Our commitment to people of our word. We do not need to make God a partner in a transaction, because God is already there with us. Our lives cannot be divided into compartments in which God is involved and other compartments in which God is not involved. There can be one kind of language in the congregation and another kind of another in the factory or the office. Christians should be people of the word. We don't need an oath to give credibility to our promise. Our yes should always mean yes, and our no should always mean no. People of the world should come to expect that Christians always tell the truth and keep their promises. It would be wonderful if Christians could recapture the reputation we once had of being people who can be relied on to always tell the truth. There's an erosion of trust in our society today. People's word is no longer their bond. Even the vows they take in marriage ceremony are taken lightly. We hear people say, "Oh well, if things do not work out, we can always get a divorce." There cannot be one standard of conduct in the congregation and another in the business world for the Christian. The fact is that God does not need to be invited into some departments of our lives and kept out of others. Clement of Alexandria said, "Christians must lead such a life and demonstrate such a character that no one will ever dream of asking an oath from them." We are obligated as Christians to be the kind of people that others will see our goodness expressed in the lives we lead, and they will never need to ask for an oath from us. We are obligated as Christians to make this world such a place that falsehoods and unfaithfulness will be eliminated, that swearing oaths will not be necessary. Our commitment to God, to be true to Him in faithful obedience and service, is our first and greatest commitment. Our second most important is to our marriage partner. No commitment given as a promise, if it is fair and right, and not contrary to the law of God, should be taken lightly by a Christian. When Jesus spoke of the commandments of the law of Moses, Jesus always made sure that his hearers understood how his new covenant and its laws would either agree with or differ from that law. When Jesus said, "But I say to you," he was laying down his new law. I hope you've enjoyed this short study, and we pray that you'll continue to come back and study with us again. Every blessing. Have a great week.